Welcome to the Primus Project podcast. The mission of the Primus Project is to explore the relationship between Trinity College, white supremacy, and slavery. The purpose of this podcast is to empower the Trinity community to think through the college's challenging histories and begin efforts of repair. The Primus Project podcast is recorded in Trinity's Rather Library Studios in Hartford, Connecticut.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Primus Project podcast. Today, my co-host Nicole Ankrah speaks with my history department colleague, Channon Miller, about their experiences as Black women navigating life at Trinity College and in the greater Hartford community. This is Nicole's episode in every sense. We've been talking about making it happen for more than a year, and I am so glad that we finally did. But before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank Nicole. Nicole first joined the Primus Project almost 4 years ago through a summer research fellowship. From that point on, she became central to the project. She worked as a researcher, a project manager, and of course helped launch this podcast as one of its co-hosts. Nicole worked in paid positions when we had funding, for academic credit when that made sense, and sometimes simply because she believed in the work. She is now officially a graduate of Trinity College, and honestly, it is hard for me to imagine what the Primus Project looks like without her.
The second thing that I want to say is that this episode we had planned for Black History Month in February. We had planned it for Women's History Month in March, and now we are here in May, and we're getting this episode out. Nicole, do you want to give us a little bit on what this episode is?
Yeah, so this was a really exciting episode to record. It was such a pleasure to sit with Professor Miller and get to hear about her experience in Trinity and broadly in Hartford. She always says that the city has raised her, that she's a daughter of Hartford, which I think is a very beautiful way to term that. And it was truly just exciting and very insightful to hear her reflections about how much Trinity has changed, how much it stayed the same, or what more we want from Trinity as Black people, Black students, Black faculty. I think that there's much more that the school could do for us and with us. And I feel like we harp on that in this conversation and much more. So I think you're in for a very exciting episode. And I'm so excited that you could join us and get to listen to the beautiful and intelligent Professor Miller. I can't explain enough how much she means to me and the support that she's provided me since I've met her. She was my thesis advisor. She was my professor and just a remarkable human being, so nice, so generous, and very, very intelligent, which you will hear as she speaks. Like, there were points where I felt like I couldn't even match up to her intelligence, but that's not to sell myself short in any way. It's just to acknowledge how smart and well-spoken she is. So thank you for listening, and thank you for being here.
Well, hello, Professor Miller. I'm so excited to have you here with me on the Primus Project podcast. I'm really excited for this episode to talk to you about the Black student experience at Trinity. I'm Nicole Ankrah. I've been co-hosting the podcast since my sophomore year at Trinity, and I've been working with Professor Miller really closely over the past 2 years, which has been really fun with my thesis, as well as being a student of hers and also looking up to her as a mentor. So that's been a really beautiful experience. And Professor Miller, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first, thank you, Nicole, for having me on the podcast. It truly is an honor to be a part of conversations with really great, dynamic, and gifted students like yourself, and platforms like this one, which are documenting really important stories. And I'm really just glad to be here and to have space to, again, share voices and stories and more. And like you shared, I am Channon Miller. I am a professor here, assistant professor of American Studies and History. And I am also an alumna of Trinity College, class of 2011. And I am from Hartford, Connecticut, and born and raised. That shapes so much of in ways that I've come to recognize, and probably in ways that I still have yet recognize, has shaped my world and my life incredibly, including my work and my research. I have fortunately, however, been able to spend time in other places, which is always a beautiful thing to do. When you're from a place, you can certainly remain and plant seeds there, but there's so much that you can learn about yourself in that place when you spend time elsewhere. I've lived in Boston, where I went to graduate school shortly after, or rather just several weeks after graduating from Trinity. I moved to Boston to begin my PhD program, and from there, I lived in San Diego with my first academic position for a few years before coming back.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I just learned so much about you. I feel like I knew a few of these details, but San Diego.
Yeah, I know. Yes, San Diego. It was a shock to me as well. It definitely wasn't on my bingo card of places where I imagined I'd live in my lifetime, but the academy is so interesting where when you finish graduate school or on your way to finishing and seeking opportunities, it really is amazing what spaces pop up and what spaces are looking for your work or voices like yours. And I grasped the opportunity, and I'm so glad I did because I learned so much there.
That is so cool. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is a good point to get into a few questions that I have for you today. And just thinking about you growing up in Hartford and being really familiar with the city, I'm sure that you had encountered Trinity maybe ahead of your time attending here.
Yes.
But that makes me wonder what drew you to attend Trinity College and what were your expectations as a Black woman entering it?
Yes, what drew me to Trinity was wanting to attend a small liberal arts college. I knew I wanted to go to an institution where the classroom size was small enough where I could get to know my peers and get to know faculty as well. When I was in high school, I had two colleges that I was weighing that were, in a sense, competing a bit. And that was Trinity College here, of course, and Spelman College. And it ultimately came down to some critical decisions around the type of support that I would have needed throughout my 4 years, and especially the type of financial support that college really demands. And being first generation and being someone who has an incredibly supportive family, but a family that is not in a space to really provide a lot of the financial support that perhaps going farther away might have mandated, it ultimately became clear that Trinity could be a home. There was especially a lot of opportunities at the time for students who were coming into the college from Hartford, different alum that had programs that funded Trinity students. And that's evolved over time, I'm sure. But the program that I was invited to be a part of was the Mitchell Marin Fellowship. He is an alum who has been able to give a great deal to the college and especially had an interest in funding or supporting the college education of Hartford students. When that opportunity arose, combined with the range of other different scholarship opportunities, the stars seemed to be guiding me to Trinity. And I was hesitant initially about remaining so close to home. Not only am I from Hartford, but I'm from this neighborhood. I could walk to where I grew up. I could walk to cousins and more. And I didn't know if I'd really get that full college experience being so close. But what my community would tell me is Trinity is another world. And even though you are home, you are also in a world where home is a bit far away or a bit distant. And I would truly come to know what they meant when I came here and adjusted and adapted. But yes, so the stars certainly led here through various opportunities. I was aware of Trinity before with different programming. I was a student at Hartford Magnet Middle, which is now HMTCA. I was a part of the first group of students that would enter the building when it was first built. Yes. Yeah. And then ultimately a part of their first graduating class in 2003 of 8th graders. Thus, that was a great connection, or rather a way that I became familiar with Trinity. I was also a part of something called Saturday Academy when I was, I believe, in elementary school, maybe a part of middle school. There was a Hartford nonprofit that collaborated with Trinity to offer Saturday educational enrichment to Hartford students in like math and science and more. And they house the program here on Trinity's campus. That was great. I had family who were a part of Dream Camp. I never was a part of Dream Camp. It was super competitive. My mom had me on that waiting list forever, but I just never could get in. So I was familiar for sure with Trinity, but it certainly also was a space where a number of Hartford people and communities and families, while we know its presence was here, it also wasn't something that we immediately connected to our, I'd say, education or life outcomes. I don't think a lot of my peers really saw Trinity as a place where they could or would eventually go.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
I relate to you in a lot of ways. I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, so very close to Hartford. And I actually came into Trinity not really knowing that it existed. I don't know if I was just maybe a little too far, but I didn't know many people that came from Trinity. But in my college search, I was able to identify desiring like a liberal arts institution and all of the research opportunities and close contact with professors. And I just identified this space as somewhere that I feel like I could grow as an intellectual, as a thinker, and as someone interacting with different histories.
Absolutely. It seemed like a place of possibility. And even though I had hesitancies about being so close to home, there was also something really inviting about Trinity that I found really unique. When I was pursuing college, Trinity had something called Preview Weekend. And Preview Weekend was a weekend where the admissions office, you had to apply to it. If admitted, it gathered up students of color to spend a weekend at Trinity. And this would happen in the fall, and you would live with a current student.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yes. So I participated in that. And that just furthered my excitement about Trinity. It fell on the same weekend as the, Mocha Talent Show, as kind of these events, these programs. The current students at the time were a part of really great organizations like the Hip Hop Festival and so much more. So I was surrounded by all of these, beautifully brilliant people, and especially people of color, Black students that really inspired me. The student who I stayed with also happened to be from Hartford, and we went to the same high school.
That's so cool.
So I was like, wait a minute, this might be something.
Yeah.
And the admissions office was, again, really encouraging, and we're really committed to building those connections. Anthony Berry, for example, who was in admissions, was one of the people who played a big part in my recruitment and the recruitment of so many others here. Yes, yeah. That so definitely helped plant the seeds too.
I know you shared a little bit about a few memories coming in, but I wonder if you could share any early experiences being a freshman at Trinity, stepping into this new environment from your senior year of high school into this new terrain.
It was definitely an exciting time. I remember feeling very positive and motivated and just ready to meet new people, connect. I made some really great friendships in my first year and built community, lifelong friendships that I have to this very day. A lot of great, beautiful memories. I felt myself really becoming a leader, learning how to really implement a lot of my interests into different clubs and organizations. I found classes I really enjoyed. It was a positive experience. It also had, of course, its challenges because I came into Trinity with a lot of weight that I was carrying, in a sense, on my shoulders. My education really mattered to me, and I knew how many people were rooting for me and believed in me and wanted this to go well. And when you have, a community of people who have these really great expectations of you and also expect you to be the change, that can be a bit weighty. Being first generation, being someone who is stepping onto a campus that generations before me who lived in Hartford, who live in Hartford, never got a chance to really step foot beyond those gates. To now be able to do that, there was something that made people around me really proud. And I felt like I needed to show up and make them proud and let them know that they made the right decision in pouring into me and in supporting me. that meant that I was really hard on myself at the same time. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to be perfect, especially in those first couple of semesters.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a bit crushing because when you receive a grade that's not quite what you're hoping for, it can lend to a bit of deep sadness or concern about your future and will you do well and all the things. And so I carried definitely a lot too in that first year. So in the midst of the joy and excitement, there was also a great deal of pressure I placed on myself too that certainly impacted me.
Yeah, I completely understand. This made me look back to my freshman experience, you know, like coming in from a high school setting where I had like parents around me constantly, you know, being on top of me about my grades or my activity in class or just whatever reports would come back from the classroom, and being in an environment where maybe that didn't happen as much and it was up to me to update my parents about how I'm doing. You know, I would come to them like, oh, I'm struggling here. Like things are not going well in this aspect. And, you know, having to carry the weight of their worry and their concern. Yeah. Along with yours, you know?
Absolutely. And then having moments where you feel a little bit inadequate. So coming into Trinity, I realized that I lived at so many different intersections. I was a Black girl at a predominantly white institution. Not only that, I was a Black girl from Hartford and I was public school educated. Where I'm from and in Hartford spaces, I was certainly someone that was doing well academically and who knew a great deal and came from, again, teachers and spaces that were pretty formidable. Hartford Magnet Middle was a really strong space. At the time, there wasn't a high school, but there were several other magnet high schools coming to form. And I'm not sure how much you know about Hartford schools or if you've taken any of the ed studies classes, which I know dig into this here so well. They do such amazing work in that department. But Hartford schools are really a part of magnets, are really into the construction of magnet schools as a part of the public school system. And it really is intending to provide students with just a fresh, new take on education, innovative education. And I'd say millennials in Hartford were really the first generation to experience these burgeoning institutions and really experimenting in a sense with how well they could do. But I thought that my high school, my middle school, I thought that they were really positive spaces. And I thought that I'd come into Trinity knowing and really well-versed in different authors and texts and literatures. And then I came and I realized that so many of my peers knew a lot more, or it seemed to know a lot more than I did. There were names that were familiar to them, history, stories. And I was like, wait a minute, but I'm a good student. I did all the things. I wasn't National Honors. You know, they say it was a good school, but relative to where perhaps my peers were emerging from and coming here from, I realized, oh, there's a bit of a difference there. So that was a bit of a hurdle, too, to really have confidence in myself, in spite of the fact that it seemed like we were coming from different starting positions.
That's really interesting to me. It sounds like your identity plays a really huge role in how you interact with the academic world in the campus setting. And I was wondering if you could say more about how it shaped maybe your classroom experience coming in and maybe not having learned certain things, or again, that sense of inadequacy. And I also wanted to ask your major as well, as you step into this space with a fascination and like almost feeling like you need to be an expert right away. Yeah.
I was especially interested in history and race and class and Black life, Black stories. I loved the stories that surrounded me coming of age. I come from a family that is so deeply proud of their heritage and so deeply committed to community. So many folks in my family are really dedicated to organizing, dedicated to justice and advocacy. And I brought that spirit with me into Trinity and wanted to read about people that reflected that rich story and that rich heritage. And American Studies, when it came down to it, was the major that provided that. There were several others that were doing, again, wonderful work, but I love that American Studies afforded me that opportunity to really read these stories in a committed way and then write about them myself and see Black life through different lenses, through the structural, through the cultural, through the literary. I wanted all those worlds to come together, and American Studies classes is where I felt the most seen and represented, and where I felt the most confident really speaking to these experiences for sure, and to the experiences that I was so committed to understanding. And that is truly what helped me select the major as well, is that classroom experience, those dynamics. Where did I feel like I could really escape or kind of push back against that kind of imposter syndrome, as they call it?
Was there a specific class that you remember taking that maybe just like blew your mind in some ways, or made you just like fall in love with this discipline?
Yes, there are so many that I took. And with it being American Studies, I can think of classes across disciplinary lines that just shaped my experiences. There was a class taught by Ann Plato Fellow at the time called Women of Color in the United States. That class is truly one that stayed with me for quite some time. I still have the syllabus because, yes, and I still have the books from that class and many others. Women of Color in the U.S., it was great to learn about and sit with Ida B. Wells. And not only sit with Ida B. Wells and her activism, but we read her diary, which is really powerful because we got a chance to, for me, really humanize a lot of the figures that we cast as heroes and that are heroic, but they are not made of steel. They are human. And reading her diary and learning about things like what she liked to wear or how she styled her hair and her love interests, I was compelled by this field that said, wait a minute, we want to know about their activism. We want to know about how she is challenging anti-Blackness and the shapes that anti-Blackness takes. But we also want to see the ways in which Black folks are just human as well. And that was a course that really allowed me to do that. And it was really one that is quite memorable for sure.
That is so cool. And I think Trinity has always had like that small ratio classroom where you could be in the classroom setting and have dynamic conversations with professors and peers. So what did that look like? I'm like really intrigued because, you know, being a student of yours, like,
and it's that seminar style conversation. That class was in LSE, and I remember us being around the table and having room to really have dialogue about the readings. And I appreciated that back and forth, being able to raise questions, have those questions come back to me. Yes, that was a big part of the experience here too. And then I also happened to be here when some of the faculty in American Studies who were a part of the foundation of the program, like Professor Eugene Leach, who was here and near retirement, I got a chance to witness and be in spaces with those types of faculty who, distinct from perhaps even my generation, don't utilize technology perhaps in the same ways. They don't really have a use for, which I think is beautiful though too, don't have a use for the slides and they're coming in and they're sitting down and they're saying, let's talk about the reading. But those classes were riveting to me. I don't remember feeling like I needed to see a visual or hear something to connect with these seminars. And that class with Eugene Leach was a junior seminar. But yes, I remember kind of just how close that experience was and how in touch I felt with the faculty and students.
I've always found that in the Trinity classroom, we're able to have these deep reflective conversations in a conversational setting that doesn't feel robotic, like, you know, like raising your hand and maybe being a number in a 500-person auditorium room, you know? Like, I think in some ways, like being a student at Trinity and being in this small school environment, sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I missed out on maybe a UConn experience. But I think the engagement that we get in the material and hearing from our peers and professors is unique in this setting.
Definitely unique for sure, for sure. And grad school really does open you up to getting at least a sense of what it would have been like at a larger institution. At the grad school level, you're also in small spaces and seminar style settings, but you also, if you're at a large, again, university, you're also a teaching fellow or a teaching assistant for faculty in those lectures with hundreds of people. And so you get a chance to see, wow, just how different the experiences are. And it is affirming to be able to say, yeah, I made the right choice in choosing a smaller school where I could kind of work through the material in a close and guided way.
Very interesting. So in talking about this, I want to segue to questions about how maybe the experience as a Black student, Black professor, how it's changed or evolved maybe since you've been here. Do you see it staying the same? Have you felt Trinity has continued to evolve in different ways, or have certain traditions stayed the same? Is the Trinity that you knew still the Trinity that it is today?
That's a great question. Being at Trinity and being within a minority demographic on campus, it definitely had its ways of really seeping in and impacting your day-to-day, in the sense that campus culture, and a lot of us sometimes struggle to find our place in campus culture, meaning parties and events, the types of music that's played. It's as simple as that. A lot of people don't think about just how, again, when you live in a place, it's not just about the academics and what's happening in the classroom, and there's the conflict there with, again, imposter syndrome and more. When you leave the classroom, you go to events and parties like a luau or what's happening campus-wide on a Saturday or Friday, and even just how those events are taking place. They don't reflect a culture that you're familiar with. Sometimes it's the food, sometimes it's the music that's played, even the way people interact with each other. Those different ways of being were unfamiliar to me and did not reflect where the community that I came from and the community that reared me. That was a bit of an adjustment for sure. But on the fortunate side of things, Trinity, as long as I've known Trinity, has always had, throughout my 4 years, Black students that are committed to shaping and curating spaces that fit our complex needs. And I came in at a time where the seniors and juniors, the upperclassmen at the time, had done such tremendous work with the organizations that they were sustaining. And so I jumped right in. And I'm really thankful for Imani and Tasibo for being those spaces that provided me with an outlet and in spaces that reflected perhaps my particular needs and wants. And those spaces weren't without conflict, to be clear. I like to emphasize that because I do think that some folks who learn about the Black experience at a PWI might assume that as long as, Black students are in Black spaces, it's kind of this really restorative event. And it is restoring, but then you also learn a lot about intra-communal differences across class lines, ethnicity lines, and so much more. But those were incredible learning experiences too. But I want to definitely acknowledge the Black organizations and spaces like the Emoja House that help make, through generations, the experience, a fulfilling one too. Yes.
That is so interesting to hear, and also reflect on how students like me, students that I know are currently interacting with these spaces and kind of keeping this tradition alive of celebrating Black life, Black culture all across the diaspora. And we have so many different orgs like CSA, Imani, Tasibo, as you've mentioned, that work so hard on the Trinity campus to come up with events that really celebrate Black culture.
Absolutely. And when you ask about changes, I'm curious to know those changes as well on the student side, because now that I'm on the faculty side, I'm not as in touch with what's happening, again, socially. I'm curious to know, and I hope that the Emoja House is still being utilized in really active ways. The Emoja House for us was also a place where parties were held, events, again, lunches, and more. It was always actively in use. Now on the faculty side, and you can tell me what you think about this, because maybe my view might be skewed or limited because I no longer live here on that day-to-day basis and am here as a faculty. But it almost doesn't seem the Umoja House is as utilized as it was when I was here. I think if I could point to a difference, that might be a difference. But again, I can't be sure because, again, I'm not here in the through and through. But it seems like the Umoja House seems quieter. Whenever I'm in the area or on Vernon Street, I'm looking for signs of something and I don't see too much happening. But again, I'm curious to know, maybe I'm on the other side and just not seeing the activity.
I would agree. I think that the Umoja House as a space should be utilized more. I do know that multiple Black orgs, Black spaces definitely try to use the Umoja House for their events, but I feel like there was a time at Trinity where the Umoja House was its namesake, a space of gathering, a space of community and bonding. Being a freshman, I think I always longed for that experience where, you could go to the Umoja House and kick it with your friends and meet people or really just use the space, even outside of programming and events, which I think it's mostly for at this time. But, stepping in, hanging out with your friends there. I do have some fond memories of events at the Umoja House from my earlier years at Trinity. But I do know that the class of 2024, I think, was the last time because they were, I think, at a time at Trinity where things like the Umoja Coalition existed and they got to interact with Black Trinity in a way. I think Black Trinity in a lot of ways is a little disjointed. I could definitely see the Umoja House as a space where that collective spirit could come back and come together. I hope that makes sense.
And that makes sense because that's the question that's come up for me is I'm curious to know what's happening on campus that makes it so that there is perhaps less of a need maybe for folks to be drawn to the Umoja House for that collective restoration. Is there something that shifted or happened? Or is there just a different approach to Black collectivity too? I'm wondering what's happening within the climate that creates the evolution of the Umoja House and its usages. Because I'm sure over time it's had its highs and lows and has changed and evolved in its utility and how people have utilized it.
There could also genuinely be a lack of education on Black Trinity history as well, which I feel I don't know. I think that it would be interesting to see students kind of dig up that archive and maybe find a way to memorialize it. And it could be something that students today could look at and draw inspiration from. And this is not to sensationalize or romanticize a Black Trinity experience, because I'm sure other generations, they could critique it in a number of ways. But I think research is so important and representing that research. I feel getting to hear stories like yours and really just learning what Black Trinity has looked like across generations could play a huge role in how the community comes together and celebrates.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's such a great point about Black history, Trinity's Black history, and the history of the students, student organizing, student programs, knowing the history of Tasibo, when it was founded, why the founders were here. Some of the founders were here a year ago for reunion weekend and were in a panel and wanting to kind of invite those folks back into the space to really speak to that story and how these organizations came to be and just the range that is the Trinity experience. That certainly, digging into that history would certainly reignite and ignite collectivity for sure in that space.
That's very interesting. Something I definitely hope to be realized someday.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. Now I have some questions about institutional reflections, with this being the Primus Project and all in our histories or our analysis of history being specifically focused on institutional accountability and institutional history. I was wondering how you would describe the institution's relationship to Black students historically and today, if you have any reflections on that.
I do have reflections on, it appears that with time, the leadership is really committed to sustaining ties to and connections with Black students. Again, while a student here was fortunate enough to have folks on the administrative level within multicultural affairs and more who were really invested in the lives of Black students, and Anita Davis's predecessor, Dean Evans, as was her role, Dean of Multicultural Affairs, was really an important presence. And I see that now. I see that continued commitment. And I think that we have hopefully seen changes over time in that area too, where it's deepened. I do find that there are, again, some challenges with perhaps the specificity of that connection. And what I mean is this. So being, of course, a scholar of Black history, life, and culture, I have to speak to how the Black experience is distinct. And it can't easily be assumed under a people of color experience. What I noticed that is perhaps different now with Trinity is that there is a absorption of all people of color in kind of this one category. When people of color are described or discussed, maybe in meetings or in different materials or in initiatives, it's emphasized students of color, people of color. The grouping together of all these different identities and experiences can prove to be a bit challenging when you have each group having particular needs. I did notice that in the past, the different initiatives seem to carry more of a distinct, again, regard for differences in identity. I'd be interested in seeing how that's working now, having just returned not too long ago, but interested in seeing if that's playing out at all, or if my sense that there's kind of a absorption of all these identities into one mass, if that's the reality with different programming and more. But it's key for sure, like you said, the initiatives of the Umoja Coalition and more, the initiatives of those who came before them, and people that I had a chance to work with when I was a student. That was really important to us, was a commitment to speaking specifically to the Black experience and having the Black experience really be understood as its own distinct entity. I think that could be an area that'd be interesting to see fleshed out a bit more.
That is really interesting.
And I don't know, again, if from a student perspective, if that's something you notice, but I'm thinking about language here and even how things are described. And yes, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm noticing this kind of emphasis on a kind of a broader descriptor.
And I have to be honest when I say this, because I think this is just like how I see it and how I've just seen people engaging with Black identity in politics and in these like corporate classroom settings and kind of straying away from that particular experience. And like you said, it being distinct. When it comes to things like equity, even though equity is very vitally important, how would you term that? Like
equity when it comes to just how different groups are understood or like their needs are understood, just equity, and different groups have different needs oftentimes and different experiences.
Yes, exactly.
And therefore programming or interventions have to speak specifically to those needs in order for those groups to be effectively reached.
Yeah, exactly.
When you ask me the question of, okay, what's different or kind of what's Trinity's relationship to, Black students and more, I'm thinking about, again, what I've observed regarding identifiers and how groups are described. And I'm thinking that could be one of the more visible differences that I notice. And so, but giving language to it is tough because it's like, how does this work? Because it's important for diversity to be engaged and acknowledged, yet also specificity. And how do we get to that?
That's exactly it. And I wonder what that would look like, because I can see people taking issue to having these specified initiatives for Black students and feeling like it takes away from other students from different backgrounds. And I think that's also comes from a lack of education, a lack of, I've seen it before where like parents or donors step in and they're afraid of these specified initiatives for some reason.
Yeah. And I know that especially now, considering the national climate and really the aversion to inclusion, it can certainly be even more trying now to really offer or speak to that type of specificity, attempting to, while navigating a climate where those conversations are so limited or restrained or, again, challenged. So that's absolutely it too, which is why student groups are so important. That's one of the key takeaways that I have from my Trinity experience is that student groups really shape. They are the vanguard. Black students, especially to me, are the vanguard. Trinity was not thinking about a lot of the initiatives that it ended up cultivating without Black students over the generations, really offering and putting forth these types of solutions. When I was here prior to the Umoja Coalition, we had organized around increased representation of faculty that looked like us, increased representation of different initiatives that responded to our needs, that over the generations, it's really the students who play such a critical role and reminding the institution of what they're capable of and what's needed and important. And even with this conversation, it's really amazing to see how over time the students have been really at the vanguard of offering up those needs.
That's so interesting, especially thinking about, I guess, the school's recent engagement with protesting and students voicing their opinions. I think organizing is really important. I'm always proud when I see my peers stepping up and speaking out and demanding things like equality, or professors that experiences at Trinity that make them feel represented and heard. And something that I would like my generation to remember is that nothing changes without our voices. Nothing changes without listening to ourselves and listening to our needs and being able to communicate them. Because I think a lot of the time we're silenced and our problems or our needs are made to feel insignificant or like too radical or unable to be realized. But I think that's an inaccuracy and just requires our continued rebuttal.
Absolutely.
I think we had a really dynamic conversation.
We did. I mean, I love these questions. Trinity, again, played such a vital role in my experience, in my world, in ways that I couldn't have expected. I mean, this is the place where I really cemented my dedication to the area of studying and writing about the stories of everyday Black people. This is where my connection to my own city deepened because I had the tools to better understand the dynamics that I was witnessing in my everyday life. And the American Studies program played such a vital role in that. And two, outside of the classroom, I can't emphasize enough of how the relationships I built here and the organizations helped me really understand what it's like to build community around shared ideals. And importantly, what it's like to walk the walk, or walk the talk rather, too, in the sense of you can read about all these theories and ideas, such as Black feminist thought, which I also had a chance to really deepen my understanding of at Trinity, and then be in spaces like the Trinity College Black Women's Organization that called on me to actually know how to implement that on the ground. What does it look like to build programming that is guided by a Black feminist ethic? What does it mean to have conversations that make Black women feel, again, seen, that enable folks to conscious raise and more? I learned all of that, here, and that really matters and again, has shaped so much. And I want to definitely note that too. And I'm optimistic about what's next for Trinity. I'm optimistic about even, the new leadership and seeing, again, the work that has been done thus far.
That is so cool and just so relatable in a lot of ways. I think the Trinity American Studies curriculum department and all the professors that I've come in contact with have really helped me be able to engage with the world in very critical ways. And it's really beautiful. And I think I just can agree to recognizing this as a space where I've grown so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even when times were trying, those were important lessons too that, of course, can be, carried. So there's something special about that. And I look forward to seeing what else I can observe from the professor lens now, what dynamics I can see or be a part of, and really, how to be helpful to just different needs that especially Black students have. I know we're running close to probably the time, but I did know you had a question about Black students and how my experience has shaped my relationship with Black students. So I can speak to that just a bit briefly, is that being a Black student here on this campus and having had experiences where I was seen and heard and knowing what that felt like, and then also having my share of experiences in classrooms where I felt a bit out of place or perhaps unseen or even perhaps had my work underestimated in many ways. Having been on both sides as a faculty now, I know kind of what type of way of teaching I want to model myself after and what type of space I want to curate. I never want to make a Black student feel a deep sense of, remorse or regret over where they are and who they are, or feel out of place. And so my experiences here on, both sides of that story have allowed me to continue to try to shape an experience that tries to keep that at the fore too. So I did want to speak to that as well, because that's such a great question. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, because spaces where we feel like we can talk to our professor and be honest and seek and receive the support that we need are very vital. Because as I was saying previously, I think we're unable to progress when we're not supported.
And again, support is also needed in next steps in shaping the pathway. And I was so glad to find faculty here that were supportive, even when there were encounters or classes where I wasn't quite sure what's going on here. I'm not quite connecting here. To also be able to know that there are faculty who really laid an important groundwork, especially towards graduate school. There were great faculty here who did that. And I am so glad to have returned to be able to work with some of them, whether that be, Scott Gack or Devarian Baldwin, or plenty of others, Laura Holt in psychology. Again, American Studies placed us in so many different worlds. I also fell in love with psychology, the community and social side of it, with folks like Laura Holt, and anthropology. Again, all these spaces kind of merging together. It was great to be able to say, there's room and space here, and to find that.
That is so beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Professor Miller, for joining me, for everything that you've shared. I've learned so much, and things that will actually moving me to think more about who I am in this space and what I want to see from Trinity and how Trinity continue to grow and aid its Black students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm thankful to have been here for this conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The research of the Primus Project was made possible by the Henry Luce Foundation and at Trinity College, the Office of the President, the Office of the Dean of the Faculty, and the Public Humanities Collaborative. Please search Primus Project Trinity College in your browser to find more information about the project, including its research and contact details. Thank you for listening to the Primus Project podcast. We look forward to connecting with you in our upcoming episodes.